Welcome back to another race preview. Today we are going over the Tremblant 70.3 course. At the time of recording here, we are about 3 weeks out from the race. So I'm going to go over a number of different pieces that you can be looking at leading up to your race, as well as tactics during the race, and also a preview of the course today. So we're going to go over lots of great info to help you crush this event. My name is Mark Cullen, the co-founder and head coach at the LP Endurance Club. We are a Waterloo, Ontario-based triathlon club, but we have athletes that we coach all over Canada and the US who are going after big endurance goals from sprint, Olympic, half Ironman, all the way to Ironman and beyond, as well as a number of runners and cyclists as well. So if you got any questions on some of the programs we have, you can check out our info at lpfit.ca. Just head over to the endurance section there. We also have an Instagram, LP Endurance, where you can get a bunch of tips around triathlon and running and engage with us on there as well. All right, let's get into it. So our itinerary for today, we're going to go over what you can be doing over these final 3 weeks and the final days leading into your race to set yourself up for success from a nutrition and training standpoint. We're going to go over all of the course review maps, as well as how you can pace the course, what you should be doing for nutrition, gear pieces you need to think about, and logistics specific to this Tremblant course. I'll be out there racing, and we got about 50 other athletes coming from the club. So you'll see lots of people with these blue LP tri kits that weekend. I've raced the half here a couple times and the full as well. So know this course like the back of my hand at this point, and one of my favorite courses on the circuit with an amazing finish line in the village there. So if it's your first time, you're really going to enjoy this one. Weather can be definitely a bit of a crapshoot on a race like this. I've had years where it's like 20 degrees, no wind, overcast, and just perfect conditions. And then I know last year, a number of the athletes were dealing with upwards of 35 degrees Celsius on sections of the run course there. So it's a bit of a crapshoot, but really just keep an eye on the forecast leading in and prepare as best you can. I'll give you some modifications of what you can do depending on what the weather is going to throw at you for those days. All right, let's look at our final weeks of training. What can we do to set ourselves up for success? We've done all this work over the last number of months. Typically in these last 2 to 3 weeks, it's not about building fitness. It's just about staying sharp. And really the rule of thumb is you're not really going to build any more fitness at this point, but you can definitely do a number of things that can mess up your race by doing silly things in workouts or not fueling enough or not recovering enough. So really this last couple weeks is just about staying dialed in, absorbing all that training you did, and get to the race ready to rip. All right, so let's talk about 2 weeks out. So for our athletes here, coming up will be about 2 weeks out from the race. So we still do a final decent big weekend coming up this weekend. So we'll do something like a roughly a 3-hour ride with maybe a short break off of it, and probably putting some intensity into that ride. I think we have something like 3 by 20 planned, 3 by 20 minutes, a little bit above 70.3 pace. And then the next day we would have a longer run somewhere around, depending on where people are at, in the 18 to 22 sort of K spot. And we'll usually throw in a bit of half Ironman work in there, something like 2 by 5K, and then the rest of it just easy. Also in this time, we really focused on working on some of those pieces around race fueling. So this is a perfect weekend to dial in the amounts and the types of fuel you're going to use for your race. We're doing a lot of, like I mentioned, specific training around some of those half Ironman efforts. So whether it's power or heart rate or effort that you're going off of, getting that really honed in so you know what to expect on race day. We're also prepping a number of our race gear. So if you have specific race wheels that you use that are maybe deeper than your training wheels, knowing that you can ride those comfortably in the wind. And then also working on things like transition. So knowing the flow of what you're going to do to set up your transition area, as well as what your T1, so swim to bike, looks like, what your flow there is, how you're going to mount your bike, things like that are all very important when you're in a stressful race environment. And then also what your T2, so bike to run, looks like on this race. There's no bike catchers or anything in this 70.3. So just knowing how you're going to get to and from your rack, what your flow is in terms of racking your bike, getting your helmet off and getting your run stuff together, and what you're going to use on that day is all things you should be thinking about now to reduce that race stress a couple days out when you're in the village and people are talking about all this random stuff. You know your plan and you're confident in it and you're ready to stick to it. All right, so that's about 2 weeks out. You still got a solid week of training here. And then we're talking 1 week out here. So this is the week before race week. So this is where we really start to taper things down. So most of our weekday stuff will still be pretty full gas during that part. And then it's really the weekend. So we're starting about 9 to 10 days out from this race where we're really starting to drop things. So our long ride will drop down to closer to maybe 145 to 2 hours, probably throwing mostly easy to moderate on that ride with maybe a 2x20 at race pace in there, still just like getting that system used to that. And then our long run would cut down a bunch, about 75% of the peak to something like in the 14 to 16K range. Again, we might throw in a little bit of tempo around 70.3 or a little bit quicker pace in there, but it's not like any epic workouts a week out from the race. Is just about staying sharp, giving our body still what it's used to getting week in, week out, but not doing anything silly that's going to take away from the race. So definitely a drop in volume, probably about 30 to 50% of what that peak week was 2 or 3 weeks out. But we're still keeping a fair amount of intensity in there, lowering the volume. And this is where we start to taper off a little bit of our strength training stuff and really just work on mobility and activation stuff. So we don't want the strength training, any of that to linger into the race and have sore, tired muscles going into there. And then as we get into race week, this is our volume is quite low during this week, but usually maybe we have 1 day off leading into the race, and then we're doing stuff on all those other days of the week. So just some shorter swims, bikes, and runs, but keeping some intervals at race pace or a little bit above to stay sharp. But it's definitely a big reduction in the frequency of workouts and duration. So for all of our athletes, we use Training Peaks and we set them up with exactly what they need to know in terms of workouts to stay sharp and the amount of volume they need for those for the race specific to that week. So they're not giving away their race performance in training that week, which is a huge piece. And then mobility and activation, as I was mentioning, we've pretty much dropped strength training as we go into race week, and it's just really keeping those key areas nice and mobile. So whether we spend tons of time on the bike, making sure that those hips, that back, calves, hamstrings, quads are all mobile, ready to perform, and then keeping a lot of those key muscles firing. So whether it's doing some glute activation stuff, things like that, the core, making sure that's still all firing well so that when we get to race day, our body is really just ready to fly. And when we focus on nutrition, loading in the days leading in, and sleep, that's where we can really get another level of fitness out on race day that maybe we didn't have when we were in those peak training weeks during the weeks leading into the race. So if you can take advantage of that, taper those 2 weeks out, it's pretty amazing the energy and performance you can pull out on race day. All right, let's look at the race schedule. So I'm focusing on the 70.3 today. So I'm not focusing on the 5150, which is on this Saturday. So for athletes, you got the great thing about Tremblant is you can go there and they can look up your name, or by the time you have your race wristband, you can swim right where the course is. Not exact, they don't have the buoys out, but there's kind of like some white buoy lines along the shoreline where you can do as long of a swim as you want. And it's awesome because there's no boats in there to worry about. So on Friday, they have it open 7 to 6, as you can see. Saturday, you'll see it's not open because they have the Olympic distance there on the Saturday morning. So if you're looking for a shakeout swim, I think they said they have it open later that day, probably more like the afternoon, but just don't expect to be able to swim there in the morning because they're going to have it all set up for the race there. So I know my plan is to maybe get my last swim in on the Friday, and then probably do one, try and get in the water a little bit before the race on the Sunday, but I'm just logistically don't want to worry about it on the Saturday. So I'll be focusing on probably a bike and swim on the Friday, and then maybe a short run on the Saturday. So athlete check-in, you got 11 to 8 on the Friday, and then 11 to 5 on the Saturday. So that's at the base camp there, which is right in the village, right in near the finish line there. So make sure you bring all the stuff you need for that. Make sure you read the athlete guide from start to finish so you know everything you need when checking in there. I think you need your ID and your like athlete QR code to check in for that. So make sure that you have everything you need there. Again, please read the athlete guide. There's so many important, intricate details that I'm not going to cover in this that are very important to this. So make sure you do that. And then, especially if you're a first timer, but like everybody should attend these, especially it's just good information, and maybe it'll cross something off that maybe you forgot about. And also it's just kind of like a calming thing for to hear about the course a little bit. But there's the athlete briefings that are at 2 and 4 o'clock on the Saturday. Also on the Saturday, you need to rack your bike. So this is the day before the race. So anywhere between 12:30 to 5:30 that day. Personally, I just like on a 70.3 day to go do my check-in and bike check all together. Just avoids me spending too much time in the village there, which can be a little bit hectic sometimes. So not a bad idea to maybe combine the two of those, but totally up to you if you want to check in before and then bring your bike back all with your stickers on it and everything ready to go. But you do have access, remember, to your bike the morning of the race to be able to pump up your tires, whether you're bringing in your own pump to give off to somebody, or they always have tons of pumps in transition. So, and then you can load all your nutrition and stuff the day before. Don't feel like you need to leave it out in the sun on the Saturday. So definitely just, you can bring all the stuff you need, your bike shoes, everything on the Saturday morning. So don't be afraid to, don't feel like you need to leave stuff on your bike on the Saturday. All right. So that's the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we got transition opening 5:15 to 6:30. It's always good to get there as early as possible to do that. I'm not quite sure. I haven't had a chance to check the athlete guide that came out the other day if it's if your stuff needs to be in bags in transition yet, or if they're actually going to let you lay it out by your bike. So that's another one to maybe check the athlete guide and attend those mandatory athlete briefings to confirm 100%. But yeah, get to transition early. Make sure you got all your stuff. Get your tires pumped up. Get your nutrition on your bike. Make sure your run and bike and swim stuff is all there and good to go. And then between 6 and 7, you can drop your morning clothes bag. So there is a decent walk from transition to the swim start. Just follow the people out towards the swim start, but it is probably a 1K walk or so to get out there. So give yourself lots of time to get out there, especially if you need to use the washrooms or anything in there. And then, so morning clothes drop off you can do in the morning between 6 and 7. And then we got the pro males going 6:50, pro females 6:55. 7 a.m. is when the age group rolling start's going to go. I'm going to talk a bit more about this stuff coming up. And then you can also pick up all those bags from 11:30 to 5. And then we got the awards ceremony and the 70.3 slot allocation. That's at 4 p.m. on the stage, which is right by the finish line as well. So that's just the race schedule. This can all be found on the website and in the athlete guide as well. So make sure you check that out yourself, print it out if you need it, and make sure you know your flow for that weekend. All right, let's talk about these final 1 to 2 days leading into the race. So nutrition wise, this is where we start to shift kind of the overall percentage of our diet towards carbs. And then I'm always adding electrolytes into my water the days before and starting to limit a little bit of those fats and fibers and veggies, stuff like that. So I'm really upping the percentage of carbs in my diet. And like the day before the race, I'm usually aiming for something around 10 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight. So if I'm a 70 kilogram athlete, I'm aiming for somewhere around 600 to 700 grams of carbs that day. And a lot of it I'm getting from like juice and drink mix and stuff like that. It's not like I'm gorging pancakes and pasta the whole day, or my gut would just be off on race day. So look at unique ways that you can get up those carbs in the day without like just stuffing yourself with really filling foods that day. I personally like to make my biggest meals the morning and the lunch before the race, and then the dinner I'm pretty topped off by then. I'm just kind of fill myself with more of a simple like regular size meal. But make sure you shift those to give yourself that carb load leading in. And then gear, this is a great time with all that extra time that you have to double check all your gear. So making sure everything's working on your bike. There is bike tech in the Ironman village, so you can always go there for last second stuff. Making sure you got your lock laces in your shoes, or if you're just going to tie up your shoes, but making sure those are all in good form. Your wetsuit's all good to go. Your goggles are in working condition. You know, they're not going to fog up on you, things like that. You got all the nutrition you need, and you know how you're going to set it up for your bike and where you're going to use nutrition on course as well. I'll cover that coming up, what's on course, but know some of those totals that you're trying to hit in terms of sodium, carbs, and hydration across your race, so that you know how to plan that out, so you're not leaving it to chance on the day of. And then if you have anything electronic, which we all have, watches, bike computers, electronic shifting on our bike, make sure you're bringing those chargers, and also making sure those are all charged up. Another one is bike pedals are chargeable as well these days. So just making sure you have all those charged at full capacity. Don't leave that. There's nothing worse than having a dead battery that's out of your control. Well, not out of your control, but a dead battery the race day when you've done all this work to train for it. Don't let a logistical thing get you like that. Training, we talked about that already, but just getting those short shakeout workouts in each discipline, just so you keep things firing your body. If you just take a bunch of days off right before the race, your body's going to be flat going into the race, and it's going to take you half the race to get warmed up. So your body's used to doing all this training, give it a little bit of stimulus so that it continues to stay firing. And also it's good for your mental flow the couple days leading into make sure that everything's dialed in and you're ready to go mentally and physically. So logistically, as we talked about, make sure you plan when you're going to do your check-in registration, as well as your bike check-in, walk through all the transitions. So when you're doing your bike racking, make sure you do a walk from where the swim exits into where the bike entrance is, and know your flow to get to your bike. So whether it's something on the side of the racks or a certain garbage can or a big sign there that will help you make sure that you get to your bike. And the amount of people I've seen lose their bikes in transition and then be wandering around, make sure that you know your path there so that you're not wasting any time there. And then same thing, how you're going to leave once you get your bike. What's the quickest route to get out? What does the mount line look like? Nice thing with this one is it's a pretty flat, wide mount line. So don't be afraid as you're mounting during the race to run past that mount line and even a little bit further. Everybody loves to like get an inch over the mount line and they're fumbling with their bikes and there's tons of people there. I prefer to just keep running another 10, 20 meters past, and then you have kind of clear space to mount your bike there, but nice flat line for mounting your bike on this one. And then also doing the reverse. So when you come in from the bike, that same spot through transition, how do you get back to your rack? And then how do you get out on the run from there? So the cool thing is it's just on the two ends of the transition. You come out of the swim, grab your bike, go out on the bike, you come back that same spot, and then you leave the run essentially where you came in from the swim. So it's all just like flow back and forth. So there's no real advantages to where people are racked in this. And then again, running through your race plan from a pacing and nutrition standpoint. And we're going to talk about the course coming up as well. So again, just making sure that you've mentally rehearsed everything you need to go through here. So there's nothing new or nothing cropping up on race day. All right, race morning. So nutrition wise, you want to eat a carb rich meal, something like 3 hours before. So for us age groupers, 7 a.m. roll and start, I'm probably up at around 4 and eating breakfast somewhere between 4 and 4:30. My go-to is usually like bagel with peanut butter and banana, or like a bowl of oats with a bunch of maple syrup in it, something like that. And then I'm also sipping on water with typically precision hydration mix that has some extra carbs in there as well as sodium. I'm usually trying to get something like 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of sodium before the race, and upwards of over 100, 150 grams of carbs that morning of easily digestible stuff. And then I'm also staying topped off with a sports drink until about 10 or 15 minutes before the race as well, just so all of my stores are topped off, and then I'm not depleted like when I get out of the swim. If you ate 3 hours before and then you didn't have anything till after the swim, that's like 3.5 hours. Then you could start to set yourself behind. So just stand topped up till the start of the race. Many people will take like a gel 10 or 15 minutes before the race as well to stay topped off. Just know what your strategy is. And then race morning, making sure you've run through that checklist of having all the gear that you need to bring that day for each discipline, and all your nutrition packed. We've definitely had people leave their nutrition in their fridge at home, and luckily got bailed out. So just make sure you have everything packed that morning. Race brain can take over and we can miss little things. And then again, always just leaving yourself extra time to set up your transition area, use the washroom, and get to the swim start with time to spare, and a time to take a breath versus having to run right into the start corral and get going. If you can start the race calm, especially for the swim, you can make it a great experience and not a hectic one. All right, I'll continue this on some of the other slides too, but just some pieces about during the race. So when we talk about the swim, pacing wise, just the nice thing with the rolling start is you'll be seated around people typically pretty close to you in fitness. So just don't feel like you need to have crazy takeout speed and hammer it the first like 50, 100 meters. Just get in, get that heart rate and breathing down, and stay relaxed, long and strong with the stroke, and just work on sighting really well and making sure that you're staying on the buoy line. And if you know how to draft, then hopping on some reliable feet during there is definitely a good way to go about the swim. When we talk about the bike, most people will be aiming for somewhere between 78 to 85% of FTP. That's when we talk power based. For nutrition, you're aiming somewhere in the 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour, 750 mils of fluids, and 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So this 60 to 90 grams of carbs part, make sure you're going off of something that you trained, and you know those items and quantities work for you. It's better to go a little bit less and know that your gut is going to be okay for the run, versus pushing limits that you haven't done before in a race here. And then when we talk about these fluids and sodium, it really depends on the type of athlete and also the conditions of the day. So fluid wise, you might need upwards of over a liter an hour if it's really hot conditions. And if you're a bigger athlete, like your demands are going to be higher on that. So just knowing what you need on that. Like I have females who are 55 kilos who might only need 500 milliliters of fluid and 500 milligrams of sodium an hour, where I have guys who might be closer to 90, 100 kilos who might need closer to 1250 to 1500 mils of fluids an hour and like 1200 milligrams of sodium an hour, and are taking on 90, 100 grams of carbs an hour. So just know these are all personal to people, and it should be what you've trained during this time. When we talk about the run pacing, usually you can look at your open half marathon pace, and it'll be something around 20 to 30 seconds per kilometer slower. This is really, again, assuming you've done all the training, you've paced your swim and bike well and not overdone it. Remember the saying, ride for show, run for dough. Anybody can go have a great swim and bike and smash it out there, but it's a triathlon, 3 sports. So really the telltale sign of how you pace those first 2 is how much you can run to your run potential during this. So open half pace plus 20 to 30 seconds. So if we want to use the example of an athlete who maybe has a 4 minute per kilometer open half pace, they might be targeting something around 420 to 430 per kilometer on this. And we'll talk about all these disciplines and the course maps coming up. When we talk about nutrition on the run, if you've done a good job on the bike, the run demands usually aren't quite as heavy as the bike. So you can aim for something like even 35 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, water at every aid station, and just knowing how you're going to get a sodium top up, whether you're using the Gatorade on course. I don't know if the Gatorade in Canada, because it's not Gatorade Endurance, if it's going to have sodium in there. So you might want to have something like sodium little pills with you that you leave in your transition, or just a little bottle with electrolytes, some way to top up on that sodium, especially if it's a hot day. That'll be uber important. All right, let's talk about the course maps here. So I talked a little bit about pacing, staying long, strong, and relaxed on these swims, but green on the bottom left there is where the swim start is. So we got that rolling start, meaning you will go in the corral seated based on your estimated swim time. So if you think you're going to be swimming 30 minutes, then line up in that area. If you think you're going to swim 35, line up in that area. Nothing worse than going in an area of the corral you shouldn't be in and either seating yourself way too far up and just getting swam over top the whole time, or the opposite, seating yourself way too far back and having to swim over top of people for the whole swim. So really just seed yourself correctly, be honest with yourself on this. It's going to make a great experience for everybody if people seed themselves correctly. So on the way out here, you can see we got 7 yellow buoys, always staying on your right side. And then these 2 corner red buoys. So you got 2 little orange guys in the middle here that you got to do as you make the turn. The cool thing is they put numbers on these buoys, so it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then you'll know the turn's coming up, so you'll be able to see those if you're looking at the buoys as you go. But really try and stay as tight to them as you can so that you're not swimming extra distance. And then a lot of times when you're coming back is kind of where you'll start to get a little bit of the sunlight maybe in your eyes on this. There is a big building behind here, hotel, where you can sight on the way back. So if the buoys are a little hard to see, or like the colors they choose are often blending in with the sun, that you can use a building in the back there. But same thing coming back, we got 7 buoys as well. And then the great thing is they've built like a really nice stair and ramp over the last number of years that you climb up here. And then it's a decently long run to transition. So just make sure, again, on your way to transition, you're not going into a full sprint. Just take your time. There will probably be wetsuit strippers if you want to use them, or you can just run with your wetsuit and take it off in your transition rack. But just stay calm during that run to transition. Don't spike your heart rate. We all know we come out of this swim and the heart rate's really high, and then you get on the bike and it takes a while to calm that heart rate down. So don't use this transition as a time to jack that heart rate up even more. So just stay calm, go into your run rhythm, and then start focusing on what you need to be doing when you get to your bike. So you will have rehearsed that before, as we talked about. So as you're running up to that transition, you're going, okay, I know I'm getting out of my wetsuit, putting my helmet on, grabbing my bike and taking off. Or maybe you need to put shoes or glasses on. Just know your flow for that day and make sure that you're starting to rehearse that as you're running over to your bike. All right, let's talk about this bike course. So it is a hilly bike course in that I think there's somewhere around like 700 to 800 meters of elevation gain on it, but really it isn't as bad as something like a 70.3 Muskoka. There is a lot of speed to be had out there if you ride the course well. So when we talk about aid stations, we got aid stations at 16K, at this turner just before this turnaround at 32K, coming back at 53K, and then also at 72K just before the final climb. And at those, we have Gatorade, Mort gels, water, and bananas. So again, when you're going through your fueling strategy, decide if you need to be picking up water from these. If you're going to use Gatorade, how many grams of carbs do you need from it? Same with Mort gels. Or if you're going to be self-sufficient for this, just know what your strategy is going to be and where on course you plan to grab them, and maybe have a contingency for it. I know personally, I usually need to get 1 bottle of water during the course. So a lot of times I'll try and get it early, just in case maybe I want it at this 16K one, but I fumble a bottle there. I can always pick one up at 32 versus like if my only time I knew all my stuff would be done at 72K and I'm relying on that final bottle and I miss it, and you could throw your whole race for a loop if you end up dehydrated or low on fuel. So just having contingencies in there, maybe carrying a little bit extra with you to make sure that you know you can be covered off for the demands of the race. So with the bike, there's a 5.5 hour time cutoff that includes the swim time as well, just for those who are curious on that. We talked about the bike power. So a lot of people are going to be targeting, most age groupers, somewhere between 78 to 84% of FTP as an average for the ride. Again, In triathlon, you don't want to be just destroying these hills out there. Like I usually set a cap of somewhere around like 90% FTP on most of the steady climbs. And then maybe some of the steeper stuff, I got to go up to closer to 100% FTP. But then I'm also keeping power on the downhills. Like we're trying to make sure I'm riding over 70% on most downhills, unless I'm running out of gears, in which case then I'll take the coast and let my heart rate drop down and just tuck in and stay super aero. But really trying to even out that power curve as much as possible, work on carrying good speed versus just trying to smash all the hills, coast the downhills. You could ride the same average power and same speed as somebody, but ride it two totally different ways. And the one person who had the smoother power curves likely to get off and still be able to run, versus the person who did a bunch of VO2 max repeats up the hills is going to have absolutely torched legs and be walking the back half of that run. So just ride smart on this. Make sure that your fueling's planned in that, again, 60 to 90 gram range. Make sure you have sodium in there, as well as hydration planned out for this. So we'll talk a little bit about, so the course itself, you leave transition here, you'll go on Mont Ryan here, and then you'll hit the 117, the long highway out and back. Some years when it's windy, it can be a little gusty across these parts. I got the elevation map coming up in the next one, so hang in there for that. So out and back on the 117, they got a little out and back here to add some distance. And then back up Mont Ryan again before you have the final Duplessis climb and descent back into transition. So when we look at the elevation map, so this is I grabbed this from my Strava from one of my past rides there. So if we look at the map here, so this first bit, Mont Ryan goes for the first about 10K of the ride. So as you come out of transition, there's a little bit of a climb and a couple rollers on Mont Ryan. There's definitely one bridge you kind of got to watch out for, that people launch their nutrition and stuff a lot. So make sure you got everything strapped in and secured for that part. And then as you get on the highway, you kind of have this net climb out for a little while before this like really fast descent. So it's straight on the highway. It's good road. You can stay in aero if you're comfortable. But you just got to watch out on the windy days, but it is very fast and it's a good like minute or two down there, but super fun descent. If you're comfortable with your descents in the aero bars, it's a really fun one there. So that rips down really fast. And then the nice part is after this mark is the time where you can really start to find some rhythm. It's never really flat in Tremblant, but these are just kind of like long rolling sections with a couple like climbs here kind of in the middle before you hit that turnaround, which is about 35K. So you see you kind of climb, do a little descent to the turnaround, and then climb out of it again. And then you can find that rhythm again after 40K. And then as you continue along, it was an out and back. So we're going to get this climb again at 50K. So if I recall, that aid station, usually they have one, usually they have that aid station almost right at the bottom of that climb. So usually on the way out, the aid station somewhere like just before you do that big descent. And then on the way back, if I recall, usually it's like right at the start of this climb where they have that aid station. And nice chance to fuel up. Again, don't smash this hill unless you're feeling like really good in this point. There's still lots of climbing to come. So be smooth on that hill, find your power target. You're going pretty slow on it. So usually you're out of the aero bars on it, unless you're a really fast athlete going over like 24, 25K an hour on this. But then you get over the top and you get a nice flying descent again. Before we get out at 60K is kind of that other turnaround on there. And then we're doing that same out and back we did on Mont Ryan on the way out. So watch that bridge again. And then we get up to this 70K mark. So this is where we're heading back and we're almost near transition here. And you got your final aid station. And then we start that climb up to Duplessis. So it's about a 10K climb up to the top of this. And there's a couple steep sections. You can see them right on the map where it gets a little bit steep, but for the most part, you just got to be really smart not to like just hammer those really steep sections. You want to be pretty strong on them, but there's also an opportunity on most of them. As you come over the top of them, you get like a quick little descent. So if you can be strong on them, get over the top, get back to power, you can carry a lot of speed and keep shooting speed into some of those uphills. So really just this is the final part before you get mostly a coast back down to transition. You'll still have a couple little climbs that you have to do on the way back down, so you don't get a free ride back. So don't totally like gas yourself by the top and leave nothing for yourself on the way down. But really, there's going to be some variance in your power in these sections, which is totally fine. It's just not about torching yourself on this last bit before you get to the run. Some of the slower athletes might need to walk your bike on some of the steep sections there. That's totally fine. Just do what you need to do to make sure that you get to that run in one piece. But overall, roads are pretty good on this course in terms of quality, especially out on the highway. So for the most part, you're not worrying about too many potholes or cracks. The roads are quite good. So just worrying about the terrain and where you're going to get your aid is the key part, and managing that effort so that you can set yourself up for a good experience on the run. All right. This is one of my favorite run courses. It's a simple out and back one, but I find you just go through so many fun sections that it's quite an enjoyable course, especially when you're having a good day out there. So if you've paced that swim and bike well, then you should be able to set yourself up for a good run. There's definitely some tactics to this run course. It's not a simple one. There is some solid gain at, it says 231 meters. It doesn't really feel quite as hilly as that. So aid stations we got every 2K. So planning for that, knowing that you got Gatorade, Mort water, bananas, Coke, and Red Bull on the course for this one. So lots of options there. Just know what your strategy is going to be, and also how you're going to get in some sodium to go along with that. And then remember, the race cutoff is 8.5 hours total. And then for fueling, if you did well on the bike, then your run demands aren't crazy high there, but still making sure you're staying topped off, something 30 to 50 grams an hour. Some athletes taking on more is great as well. And then just making sure you're topped up with sodium. In terms of pacing, we talked a little bit about that, but if you know your like threshold pace, which is for most athletes somewhere between 10K for a slower athlete, or up to almost half marathon pace for a faster athlete, roughly what you would do for like a 60-minute all-out race. But you should be able to hold somewhere between 86 to 90% of that threshold pace, assuming that you've done the training and you've paced the rest of it well. So we talked about that 4-minute pace threshold person targeting something like 425. So if they go out, which they could, at 410, 415 per K, typically they're going to pay for it in the back half. So just knowing those paces ahead of time, being patient in that first 5 to 10K and set yourself up. If you do that well, you can have a really good experience charging by people on the back half of this course. But I've seen many people go out too hard and on these. So when we talk about this first 4 or 5K of the course, you come out of transition and there's like a pretty pitchy climb right away. So again, you haven't even had a chance to find some rhythm. Just like cruise up that hill, use the downhill on the other side, and then you can start to find some rhythm. But what happens after that is, as you're kind of coming past that hill and you're starting to make this turn, you'll start to go, and it's almost like a little 3-part staircase where you kind of climb, level off, climb, level off, climb, level off. So you can see if you go out way too hard in this first 5K, that really you combine that with the uphills, you're just going to torch yourself for the back half of this race. So some of the best race strategies I've seen on this one is just dialing it back by 5 to 10 seconds per K, especially through that first 5K. And then if you do that, you really set yourself up in this middle section to find a lot of rhythm as you go through the old town there and onto the rail trail, which is really nice and covered. Just know on the way out there, it is a slight net downhill. If you're having a good day, you don't even notice the downhill or the uphill really as you're coming back, but it's one of those ones, if you didn't pace it well as you're coming back, it is a very slight like net uphill that you don't even really notice. But essentially all the way out is that net downhill running on the trail all the way back. But the great part is if you've paced this well, as I mentioned, that you get to ride that staircase back down on the way in. And I had a year in 2017 where I paced it really well. I went out conservative in that first 5K, found my rhythm from 5 to about 15, 16K. And then I had so much energy. I was just bombing those downhills and flying by people on that last bit. So if you set yourself up, there's lots of time to be gained back on the way coming home. And there's nothing more motivating than passing people as you're coming to the finish. So you can use that if you look at 16K down till about 20K, lots of net downhill there. You'll go over that bump again. You got a slight, you'll see just before the finish line, you got this slight little climb up here that can be a bit grueling, but you can almost leave it all out there till the top of that climb, because what happens as you turn there, then you get to go straight downhill through the village right to the finish line. So there's no real effort needed in that last, call it 500, 700 meters. So you can really push it and kind of leave it all out there at the top of that hill and just let gravity take you home on the run there. But yeah, it's one, if you can be patient in that first 5K, I don't think you're going to regret it in the back half of that run. So maybe work to break it into 5K sections, nice and smooth in that first 5K, start to find your rhythm, use that downhill, find some good pacing in that next 10K. You're making the turnaround, trying to hold almost that same pace as you're coming back out if you've paced it well, and then you can kind of go to work in that last 5 or 6K to really hit it and bring it home strong. So if you see me around the during the course of this weekend, I'll be wearing the LP blue all weekend. So come say hi. Always happy to chat and love hearing about people's races. Best of luck to you if you're racing, and we will see you all out there. Best of luck with your training in the last couple of weeks, as well as your race itself. Cheers.